नमस्कार। मेरा नाम पीयूष तिवारी है और मैं सेव लाइफ फाउंडेशन का संस्थापक हूँ। मैं शुरू करना चाहूँगा गोमंत विद्या निकेतन को बहुत तहे दिल से धन्यवाद करते हुए कि आज आपने मुझे ये अवसर दिया कि मैं आके सेव लाइफ फाउंडेशन के बारे में, सड़क सुरक्षा के बारे में और ट्रॉमा केयर के बारे में आके आपसे थोड़ा बात कर सकूँ। आपने ज़्यादातर फिल्में देख ही लिया है कि हम लोग क्या करते हैं, तो शायद I may not have as much to share, but I'll still try and share a few things that are not covered in that video. I'll keep this conversation in both English and Hindi. Uh, हालांकि मुझे मराठी समझ में आती है, लेकिन मैं मराठी बोल नहीं पाता हूँ अभी तक. I've been working in Maharashtra for many years now, so I understand the language well. Uh, but just in terms of the issue that Save Life looks at, the issue that we work on, I want to begin with a question to all of you. Is there anybody in this room who does not know? And I want to repeat myself. Is there anybody in this room who does not know, even a single person, who has been affected by a road crash? Either through injury or through financial distress or through legal distress. Is there anybody in this room who is lucky enough to not know even a single person who has gone through that distress? So most of us actually know someone or the other who's been affected by the issue. The issue has, in many cases, come into our direct lives, into our families, into our periphery. And yet many of us are grappling with trying to understand कि इस विषय को हम actually सुधारें कैसे. तो I'll give you my story, some of which you saw on the video. But the larger story is that I come from a fairly humble family. When I was 12 years old, I still remember as a 12-year-old, I was in Delhi. It was a bright sunny afternoon. I was standing on a balcony of my house. It was a first floor house. I was looking over onto the road. And in the background, I remember that a lot of things that we had grown up with, our television set, our dining table, our chairs were being taken away. And what had happened was that my father, who had left his private sector job and decided to become an entrepreneur, his venture unfortunately had failed. And we were left with a very significant burden of debt that led to us losing almost everything that all of us have become used to as a normal part of our life, fridge and so on and so forth. And same day, from that 3-bedroom house in Delhi, we moved to a 1-bedroom house in Noida, which is outside of Delhi. And that began almost, I would say, an 8-9 year journey of seeing my family and my parents struggle to recover from that financial distress, to continue to run the family. And मुझे आज भी याद है कि one of the advice that they had received was to move the children, we were 3 of us, from private schools to government schools. And while there's nothing wrong in government schools, my parents felt that that kind of a shift would be significant for us to bear in terms of our education and so on and so forth. And even if they had to take loans, they were willing to do that to help us continue to be in those schools. The reason I'm sharing this story with you is that that's for the first time I learned about resilience in my life, about how do you go and look at the bottom. And when I say bottom, I'm literally talking about at night, sometimes the toilet overflowing and us seeing excreta all over the house. So from seeing the bottom to actually how do you recover and how do you, emerge out of that is something I learned from my parents, seeing them go through this entire crisis that we had been exposed to. Now, the other thing it did was that it also built in me and in all of us, my siblings also, a great sense of seva. That seeing our parents, we wanted to serve them, but we also wanted to serve the community that we lived in because they all supported us and they all tried to help us, come out of this situation. Uh, when I, graduated from college, I went to Delhi University. When I graduated from college, I decided that I wanted to immediately take up a job so I could support my family. And but I also knew that I did not. I had become a computer engineer, but I can tell you that from my second year itself, I knew that I was not meant to sit and code software, and did not like that. And again, with due respect to all the software developers who are taking our country forward, it was not something for me. And I wanted to do something more, something that could contribute to the society. So I ended up joining, at that time, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. And I remember my first job ended up being an internship in the Prime Minister's office in what was called the India Brand Equity Fund, which the Honorable PM had set up to promote India as a global investment destination. It was a great exposure. There was no money, there was hardly any money in it. But after the first 3 or 4 months, I ended up getting a full time job there. And the next 4 years were really rich in terms of experience. Again, not a significant salary. I couldn't support my family the way I wanted to. But it gave me a tremendous amount of exposure. And post that 4 years, I ended up in the private sector. And at the age of 27, I became the youngest CEO of a private equity fund in the country. This was a US based fund that had just come into India. And I had joined them as an engagement manager in 2006. By 2008, I had become the head of the India operations. Again, the reason I'm telling you this story is because that was the first time in my life that I got exposed to resources. What it is to have resources. I had a salary that was many times over my software engineering classmates. I was running an organization with 300 employees. I had learned, how India functions. I had exposure to government, but I also had learned about business, and so on and so forth. And that really became the cornerstone of my skill set, which is how do you build things, starting from a country's reputation, right down to how do you build nuts and bolts in an organization. And I remember that this was again an afternoon story, incidentally. The previous one was also that. On 5th April 2007, this was a few months after I had been promoted into this new role. I had just bought this nice car, and I was on my way back home. I had been able to start supporting my family in a very significant way. I was able to pay off a lot of debt that the family still had, despite the many, many years that had gone by. And I remember that I was driving down the Gurgaon Delhi highway at about 4:30 in the afternoon, early evening, and I received a call from my father, and I answered the call on the car Bluetooth, and he told me that in very high speed speech, he said, your cousin Shivam has met with, उसका बहुत serious accident हुआ है और आप immediately घर आओ, हमें जाना पड़ेगा. So I told him कि मैं already रास्ते में हूँ, and I can try and see how fast I can get to you, so that we can all head to Kanpur where this incident had happened. Until then, I had not imagined what had actually happened in that incident. I was only told that he's injured. But I immediately started thinking about Shivam. And Shivam was this, at that time, was this, this bright 16-year-old boy who wanted to become an army officer. He was preparing for his NDA exam. And we had almost an 11-year, 12-year age difference. And to me, he was more like a son than a cousin because many reasons. But one of the reasons was that Shivam's father, my mama, had passed away in an accident when Shivam was only 6 months old. So for me, it was, we were raising Shivam. He was looking up to us. He looked up to me because I had played a role in helping my family, and he wanted to help his family because, his mother and grandmother had raised him all alone. And so I immediately started thinking about him. And I remember that that morning of 5th April, I had wished him on his birthday. And now hearing that this, by afternoon, this incident had happened, and I was still hoping that, everything will be fine. And I'm still thinking about him. And 10 minutes later, I got another call from my father. And this time he said, "Don't tell your mother, but Shivam is no more." And the moment he said that, I still remember and I still feel it in my body. I had a chill that went down my body. I still remember that I couldn't believe what I was hearing. और मैं बिल्कुल फ्रीज हो गया उस मोमेंट में एंड आई हैड टू stop my car. I still remember there was a bus stop at Dhola Kuan in Delhi. I don't know how many of you have been there, but where I left my car because I simply couldn't drive anymore. And I took an auto rickshaw back home. That night, we somehow found a train. My father and I sat near the toilets. My mother, some decent gentleman, gave her some space to sit. And we all went to Kanpur. And the next morning, I went to the mortuary to get his body with my family. And we brought him out. I saw for the first time what the accident had done to him. And I will spare you the pain of visualizing that. But one of the most horrific things I've seen in my life. And after that, I still could not fathom that this had happened. Just in a day, everything has changed. And that's what road crashes do to 1.2 million people each year. They leave their homes every morning. They say bye to their loved ones. They are going out to earn a living, going to school, going to healthcare, sometimes just for leisure, and then they don't come home, and then their families receive their mangled bodies, at the end of the day. And this happens to 1.2 million people each year around the world, of which about 180,000 live in India. Because I could not believe what I saw and what I had experienced, it set itself almost as a trauma in me for a long time, and I wanted answers about why this had happened. So after the cremation and everything, I next day went to the scene of the incident. This is the Kanpur bypass road, as it's called. And I started asking people who were there. These were, casual vendors and others. कि भाई साहब कल हुआ क्या यहाँ पर, आपने क्या देखा यहाँ पर होते हुए? And many people told me what they saw, and what had fundamentally happened was that Shivam was on his way back from his NDA tuition class, and at one point he tried to cross the road, and as he was crossing the road, Jeep coming in the wrong side of the road, driving in the wrong direction of the road at high speed, it hit him, and he fell to the ground. He was injured, but not severely, and he tried to recover, he tried to get up. The driver of the Jeep, also a very young person, panicked, tried to flee the scene, and in that process ran over Shivam once again. He still had some life left in him, so he dragged himself to the side of the road, and he sat with his head next to a tree, asking people for help. And I'm told that This was 3 in the afternoon, so a lot of people stopped to see what was going on. Many people offered him water, many people threw water at him so he would remain awake. But unfortunately, nobody did anything that would save his life. Nobody called the police, nobody called the ambulance, and nobody rushed him to a hospital. So after waiting for about 40-45 minutes by the side of the road, is what I'm told, he bled to death on the scene itself. Now this, when I learned about these circumstances, it became unacceptable to me that we would allow someone to die like that. Forget about a human being, I would not even allow an animal to die like that on the road. And it took me back to my roots and how I had grown up and how family as a unit had become so important for me and how this issue had completely attacked my sense of family and my sense of who I need to protect. And so I did not start Save Life out of some great vision for serving the country. I started Save Life because the problem came home. And while I wanted to do something for my country and for my society, I literally was thrown into this issue by accident. So after that incident happened, as I also mentioned in the video, I traveled, I wanted answers. I was very disconcerted. I took leave from work. I spoke to my boss in Los Angeles and I said, I wanted, this incident has happened, I need some time off. And I took the time off to travel across the country and met with many lawyers, doctors, police officers. And again, as I mentioned in the video, learned that 50% of those dying in India back then on the roads could have been saved if they had received assistance on time, if they had received help on time. And that message is fundamentally what became the founding stone of Save Life Foundation. I said that, okay, if I can do anything, the very least I want to do is to make sure that people like us who want to help those who might be injured should be able to help out of humanity and should not have to go through court procedures, should not have to be detained by hospitals, should not be questioned by the police as though we are criminals, only for the act of helping another person on the road. And with that vision, I set up the Save Life Foundation about 9 months after Shivan's passing and after studying about what I had learned till then. The journey post that was really filled with, I was still working in my job because somebody had to pay the bills, not just of at home but also of Save Life. But I kept meeting members of parliament, police officers, judges, requesting them that a good Samaritan law be introduced in the country that would insulate and protect all of us from the kind of hassles that we face when we try and help an injured person on the road. I got a lot of assurances, I got a lot of sympathy. A lot of people told me that this is really needed, इसकी तो बहुत ज़रूरत है, लेकिन पार्लियामेंट को ही करना पड़ेगा, हम तो पता नहीं ऐसे अकेले कैसे कर सकते हैं. Many people asked me, how many people are with you? Is this a public movement? Yeah, is this the demand of one person? And at that time, I told them it's a demand of one person because I don't have a public movement. I don't have anybody with me. But it's a legitimate demand because we are talking about 75,000-80,000 lives that can be saved if people came forward to help them and provide them care and assistance. So 3 years passed and I kept getting assurances. And then I decided that, this is not something that is going to happen just by pleading or by requesting. Something had to shift. And so I did 2 things. I quit my job in the private sector. And this was a very hard decision for me, given where the family was coming from and what our circumstances had been. It was very scary to go back to what the bottom might look like. But I again thought of the resilience that we had built. And the good thing about having seen what the bottom looks like and having emerged previously is that you're not afraid to fall back into it any longer. So my risk appetite was very high as a result of that. So I quit my job and I moved full time to Save Life. Is the first thing I did. This was in June of 2011. In April 2012, I took the government of India to Supreme Court, and with the ask that under right to life, we need to have provisions under which people who try and save that life must be protected, so that people are not dying on the roads in full public view while some people make videos and other people wonder what they can do. Obviously, there was a lot of opposition initially because we were talking about reducing police powers to detain anyone, question anyone. We were talking about hospitals not demanding payments from people. We were talking about courts giving special privileges to Good Samaritans and not subjecting them to 10, 12, 15, 20 years of court appearances in these cases. So a lot of opposition initially because you were trying to change how the system moves. And I soon learned that this fight, although has to be fought in the court, has to also go outside the court. And that is where we started building some sort of a public momentum around this. We created a group of victims' families that had been affected by the issue, very similar to mine. We were able to find media persons who were very interested in the issue and who were willing to write about the issue. I was able to raise some money and build a team with that. So I was able to hire some lawyers to work full time with us, some policy people, some data researchers, and data remains the cornerstone of our work even today. And today we are a much larger organization. I'll share with you about that. But initially, all of these things were struggles. But we persisted. We got 100 members of parliament to write to the Prime Minister of India asking for a Good Samaritan law and asking for the government's opposition to be stopped in the Supreme Court. We had Amir Khan that invited us on Satyamev Jayate, and we had an entire episode dedicated to this issue where I spoke about the Good Samaritan law and some other work that we had done. And eventually, the government of India in 2015 did something unprecedented. By this time, Mr. Nitin Gadkari had taken over as the transport minister. I was able to meet him. I learned from him that he was also an accident victim and was very empathetic towards the issue. And thanks to his presence, thanks to the momentum that we had built, the media presence that we had been able to build, and the Supreme Court's notices and the Supreme Court's interest in the issue, we were able to get the government of India to withdraw its opposition from the court and requesting the court to actually set up the Good Samaritan law. The court actually said, no, we will not do it. Why don't you go and do it first? And if you fail, then we will do it. So the government tried, issued guidelines. We realized that no state followed those guidelines for almost 8-9 months. This was in 2015. And then on 30th of March 2016, the Honorable Supreme Court invoked its special powers under Article 141, 142 of the Constitution of India that gives the Supreme Court the power to institute laws in the case of what they would define as a national emergency. And in its judgment, the Honorable Supreme Court of India called this issue a national emergency and read out a detailed judgment instituting a nationwide Good Samaritan law and making it binding on all courts of this country. So as of 30th of March 2016, the country has a Good Samaritan law backed by the Honorable Supreme Court of India. In this journey of getting the Good Samaritan law, we had also discovered one more thing, that there were some challenges in the existing provisions of the road safety law itself, the Motor Vehicle Act. And one of the clearest examples of that was the trucks that you see on the road that carry those rods, जिसमें सरिये निकलते हैं पीछे से. तो the Motor Vehicle Act under Rule 93(8) of the Central Motor Vehicle Rules, banned the movement of those rods, protrusions, except for if you're a truck. That was the law. The law was that you can't carry protruding load unless you are a truck. So in 2014, because we had already become familiar with how the court procedures run, we took the government to court once again, saying that this proviso that allows trucks to carry protruding rods has to be struck down. Because in 2012 alone, close to 10,000 people had been killed by getting impaled by those rods. Majority of them were decapitated. So it required an immediate intervention. We were able to use RTI to show that this had indeed happened. And the Supreme Court immediately took note, and the government of India had to strike down the proviso in 2015. So between 2015 and 16, we had two successes. We were able to get a nationwide ban imposed on trucks from carrying protruding rods, in addition to getting the country a Good Samaritan law overall. But I want to ask you something. When you think of an accident, or what we call a crash, we never use the word accident, because accident is always unavoidable. And we know that every single crash is avoidable. That's why the airline industry changed their nomenclature from air accidents to air crashes decades ago, because accidents are unavoidable. But with proper research, proper understanding, proper intervention, you can prevent them, and therefore they can't be called accidents, they can be called crashes. They are called crashes. So in terms of road crashes, let me ask you, when you think of a road crash, what do you think about? What do you think in terms of the factors behind road crashes? Any thoughts? So you're all right. Every single one of you has given the right answer. But when we look at road crashes, what we do is that we break a road crash into two parts. What caused the crash and what caused the injury in the crash. What caused the crash could be a combination of human, infrastructure, and vehicular issues. So you have a driver who loves speeding. You have a road that has not been designed to withstand high-speed vehicles. And you have a vehicle that, for instance, has poor upkeep of tires. These three issues will come together to cause the crash, right? And then we look at what causes the injury in the crash. Now, to understand what causes the injury in the crash, you have to get inside the crash. What is happening during the crash? If a person is not wearing a seat belt in the front or at the back, their body is interacting with the metallic structure of the vehicle in which they are. So their bones are breaking, their brain is getting affected, spinal cord is getting affected, so on and so forth. If the vehicle is not of good quality, the vehicle is getting intruded. So in many cases, even in Goa, you would have seen vehicles go and ram into parked trucks or parked vehicles, right? So the A pillar of the car breaks in and you have direct impact onto the people. Or after the crash, the vehicle goes and interacts with a bridge pillar or a drainage wall, as we saw in the case of a well-known billionaire in the country who passed away in a crash outside Bombay a couple of years ago. So again, what caused injury could be behavioral, which is not wearing a seatbelt or a helmet, could be vehicular, which is being in a vehicle that is not safe, or could be infrastructural, which means interacting with a concrete structure that enhances the injury in the crash. Right? So we look at both these things. Now, because we understand this, in 2016, after the Good Samaritan law came, it almost became a moral impetus on us that we have learned these things now in this 8-year journey. We can't stop now because we have been able to get the Good Samaritan law, or that we have been able to push for an amendment to the Motor Vehicle Act. We have to keep pushing because now we have to prevent these deaths from happening. And the prevention of death part has to happen when you address both causes of crash and cause of injury together, not just one or the other. And to address that, we set up the program that you saw in the film, which is called the Zero Fatality Corridor Program, where we identify the deadliest roads in the country. We go there, we understand what's happening, what is causing crashes, and what is causing injuries in the crash. And we then work with the government to systematically fix that. So on the Mumbai-Pune Expressway, and this is often quoted by Mr. Gadkari because he built that road and he always says, he always quotes me when he's talking about it. It's a 94.5 kilometer road. On that 94.5 kilometer road, we identified 4,500 road engineering errors. We also identified a large number of enforcement issues. We, of course, identified a large number of behavioral issues. And we identified that the trauma response was almost 30-40 minutes is what it took for vehicles to arrive, help to arrive. And then, thanks to the government of Maharashtra and Nitin Gadkari ji, 4,000 of those 4,500 issues were fixed in the first 18 months itself. And that alone led to a 39% drop in deaths in the first 18 months on that road, just fixing the infrastructure issues. We then started looking at trauma care, we started looking at police enforcement, we sponsored, you saw Mahindra's logo, we partnered with many companies to sponsor cameras, speed cameras on that road. So by combining road infrastructure fixes with enforcement and with trauma care, till date, we have been able to reduce deaths on that road by 60%. We then replicated that onto the old Mumbai-Pune highway, which was a much more complex road because it passes through villages and towns, and where you have pedestrians, cyclists, and so on and so forth. And there, we have been able to achieve a 63% drop in deaths till date. When Government of India heard about this intervention, they called us to have a chat to understand what we are doing, how we are doing it, and then partnered with us to take this model to 100 districts and 100 highways across the country. So as on date, we are scaling this zero fatality corridor model to nearly 100 highways in 16 states across the country. We are already present in about 30 of them at this point of time. Over the next couple of years, we'll reach all 100. And our goal is to reduce deaths on those roads by at least 50%, if not more, eventually leading to a nationwide drop in fatalities on the roads. But the one thing that we are also doing in addition to that is that we have picked up the issue of trauma care as an independent issue. And the reason is not just because the genesis of Save Life comes from trauma care, but also because trauma care is not just about road accidents or road crashes. Every year, about 4 lakh people in our country die because of injuries of various forms, traumatic injury, of which 1,70,000, 1,80,000 people are involved in road crashes. But the remaining 2,20,000 people are dying because of other forms of injury. And so trauma care has a significant role to play not just in road crashes, but also in other forms of trauma, other forms of injury, to be able to save people's lives. And when we look at trauma care for us is, so when you think of trauma care, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? First aid, ambulances, paramedics. What else comes to your mind when you think of trauma care? Quick response. When we look at trauma care, We look at all of these things that you're saying, but we look at it from the perspective of the victim. And I always think about Shivam in this case. That after he was run over, and we have forgiven the driver long ago. He panicked, he made a bad judgment call, he ran over him, he got punished for it, both by public and the law. But in that 45 minutes, what could have happened? And this is what should have happened in that case and in every single case of road crash in this country. After the incident happened, somebody should have picked up the phone and called a number for help. But what number? Even today, India has many different numbers to call for help in different parts of the country. Some states you call 108, some states you call 112, some states you call 102, some states you call 100, some places you call 1033, some places you call a 10-digit mobile number, which you have to remember. So there should be a universal access number that even a 3-year-old can remember, that that's the number to call if there is an emergency at home. And that number for our country is going to be 112. It's still not there in terms of full integration, but 112 will be the number. That will be the universal access number that you call for help. So you see something, he's lying on the road, help has been called. Help is on its way. While help is on its way, somebody is providing assistance to the person who's injured. Assistance could be first aid, as you said, but if you don't know how to give first aid, words of comfort and confidence play a significant role in bringing the body out of trauma. The least you can do after you have made a call for help is to give them confidence that they are fine, that they will be fine. And if you're trained, then you can provide help in controlling bleeding, stabilizing their C-spine, giving CPR if needed. If you see their body part lying, securing it, because surgery is advanced, we can put back the body parts together now. So you can do that as a good Samaritan, as a bystander, and of course you're protected through the Good Samaritan law that also got passed by the Parliament in 2019 after the Supreme Court's judgment in 2016. Now help has arrived. What should the help do? The help should be able to not just transport you, it's not a taxi service to the hospital. It should be able to sustain and save that life. It should be able to give advanced care, that early advanced care that victim requires. It should have the right equipment and it should have the right properly trained personnel, right? I often, when I go on audits of ambulances along with our team on highways, I ask them a very simple question. I ask them, pulse kaise check karte hain? So let me ask you the same question. Pulse kaise check karte hain? So for a paramedic, the quickest and the fastest way to check pulse is here. And I get answers showing me this. So that's the state of paramedical staff or so-called paramedical staff currently in our ambulances, because no standards are defined. You can become a so-called paramedic with a 3-month program or a 3-year degree course, right? So the paramedic arrives, is able to help, then they put the person in the ambulance. Ambulance has the right equipment to sustain that life. The paramedic is also able to understand as to which hospital to take the person to. Right now, 108 service takes the person to the nearest government hospital, right? Nearest government hospital could be 20 kilometers away, but you might have a private trauma center 3 kilometers away. So a lot of protocol issues there, which we have to fix. But they have to transfer the person to the hospital. When they are transferring the person to the hospital, they should be able to make a call and let the hospital know that we are arriving and that the victim has these kinds of injuries. So they can arrange for preparation at their end, right? And once the victim arrives at the hospital, there should be clear pathways depending upon the nature of injury in terms of what needs to happen. In the case of the businessman who I mentioned earlier, it was a traumatic brain injury, required an immediate open brain surgery. But he was first taken to a primary health center. Right? So you need to be able to determine where that person goes. Now let me ask you a question. Is it not our right? Don't we deserve this form of care? We deserve this form of care. We are in 2025. We don't deserve, a confusion in terms of which number to call, lack of confidence in terms of how to help the victim, a dilapidated ambulance arriving with untrained paramedics, or going to a hospital that is not even equipped to help us. It's murder. So what we call this is a chain of survival. It's an interlinked series of events that have to be interlinked and that can't work in isolation. Simply putting more ambulances on the road will not save anybody's life. You need to have the before and after addressed while addressing the transportation part. And that chain of survival is something that we feel is a fundamental right of all Indians and should be institutionalized through a right to trauma care law, just like we have right to education now, right to information and so on and so forth. Because trauma care, more than any other form of healthcare, is time sensitive and fundamentally works to preserve life in that very instance, which is fundamentally our fundamental right. So that's really what we are working towards. I'll wrap this. I'm sorry I've taken more time than I had planned, but I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. One thought is that is around public problem solving. We all see public problems all around us. And oftentimes we feel that public problems are daunting, that they're too big to deal with. Right? In my now 17 years in Save Life, I can tell you that the biggest of problems can be solved when you start with a small part of it. I don't think we have to pick up the entire, climate change as a global issue to be able to solve climate change, or the increase in temperatures. We have to pick the problem where we can solve it. And I think in our case, we picked up a simple aspect of wanting to help someone and having the right to help someone. Not because of obligation, not because of legal requirement, not because of any kind of guilt, but only and only out of humanity. So we started small, and today our goal is that we want to take Zero Fatality Corridor program to other low and middle income countries. We want to ensure that all districts of India have zero fatality corridors and can become zero fatality districts, because it works. We know that it works. And so by taking a systematic approach, starting small, you can solve even the most daunting or the most complex looking problems. And regardless of what your problem is that you want to pick up and you want to solve, I would encourage you to pick up a strand with a very clear ask and a very clear solution and work on it and build on that success to be able to deal with the larger issue that you are concerned about. The second thought I wanted to leave you with is something that I've learned in my journey. And I was always asked about this, that, is this, we love hero worship in India. So it's all about this one person who's done something. Piyush Tewari got the Good Samaritan law. It's actually not true. Along the way, in this entire journey, I have had tremendous support from dozens and dozens of people who have extended that support for no reason except to get this country a Good Samaritan law. I have, for every government officer who has shown me the door. I have met 5 who have embraced us. My faith in the uh, in our bureaucracy, in our politics, has been reinstilled because of my work, because I've seen so many good people across all of these walks of life. I have friends who are IPS officers, I have friends who are IS officers who are incredible human beings. And they have their priorities, they have their duties, they have their rules laid out. But fundamentally, there are people along the way who will always come forward to help you. For every donor who said no to us, we found 3 who said yes. Today, Save Life is going to be crossing 100 full-time employees. We operate at a much, much bigger budget than we did when we started. We are supported and funded by the likes of the World Bank Group, Red Cross, some of the biggest philanthropic families in the country. We don't accept any penny from the government, and we never will. But we are supported by a lot of good, meaningful organizations. People. So the second thing I thought I want to leave you with is that never think that it's going to be lonely or it's going to be a journey with a lot of struggle. Of course, I've had struggles, both personal and professional, in this journey, all sorts of risks, but incredibly lucky to have found support and have found mentorship and have found extreme positivity from a lot of people. And the third thing is that I wanted to leave you with is that, and this is not just for road crashes or road safety, but as happy as I am with all the positivity and all the support that we have received, there are always times where one is feeling low, when you're wondering why you're doing this. I wake up oftentimes looking at mangled bodies, post-mortem reports, getting on very urgent calls because we have to move a team, because somewhere else 30 people have died in one go after a bus crash, and so on and so forth. So it can get fairly challenging, because you have to confront trauma every day, because we are in the trenches. So people, it's natural to feel that, why are you doing this? Why are you doing what you're doing? Sometimes, we don't achieve success. It's very hard, both in policy as well as in on-ground work. Getting multiple agencies to work together is not easy. But what I've learned in terms of what keeps one going, I think the fundamental thing is talking to the victims, talking to the end beneficiaries. Every time I have felt dejected, every time I have felt I failed at something, I have gone back to the community. I have spoken to victims' families. We have organized formally to bring victims' families to interact with us, or we go and work with them. And that has kept us, kept telling us that there is still some way to go. We have to keep doing this. And that's what given us the energy, along with all the successes and all the other things. But really talking to the victims, and I'm using victim as a general term, it could be any beneficiary that in your area you're trying to affect, whether you're in government or private sector. It's really the end beneficiary, talking to them and staying close to them and having your ear to the ground is really what keeps us going. So on that note, I want to thank Gomant Vidya Niketan once again, the entire team that has put this event together, for this incredible opportunity to come and have a word with you. I really hope that road safety becomes a big movement in Goa, because there is a big need for safer roads here. I came here a few years ago to study what was going on, and I can tell you that this requires a ground-up local movement to address the issue, because there are a lot of cultural, local community issues that you have to address. And we are always here as Save Life Foundation to assist, to provide any kind of help that we can. But I really hope that you have a safe and a very happy 2025 as we all enter into this year. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And as far as Goa is concerned, we of course know the national level statistics around Goa that the government of India releases. And we know that while as a state, the number of deaths comparatively to other states might be low, but when you look at per 100,000 fatalities or the crash severity, Goa is amongst the top 10 in the country. So it is a significant issue in this state, and it requires road infrastructure issues, significant amount of enforcement. I think that's one area that, and not just traffic management. I think we confuse enforcement with traffic management. Enforcement has to be targeted around what is causing deaths. And whether it's night or day, you have to be committed to it and you have to enforce against it. So if it's trucks that are running over, pedestrians, then you have to enforce against that. Third aspect is the road engineering part that requires significant improvement. So I think there is some work required in the state, and I'm pretty sure that with the new funding scheme coming from the government of India, there'll also be resources for the state to address these issues. When my team comes back and reports to me that we have had a reduction on a particular highway, my first question to them is, has any part of the highway gone under construction, because of which speeds got reduced, and now we are claiming that we did this amazing job. And the second thing is that has there been a general speed reduction because of increase in traffic volume and so on and so forth. So this is an integral part of our approach. So when we begin on a particular highway or a road, we do what is called a speed management study, where we are trying to understand the percentile, typically the 85th percentile of speed that is operating on that particular road. The 85th percentile speed on the Mumbai-Pune Expressway in 2016 was about 95 kilometers an hour. The 85th percentile speed today is approximately 90 kilometers an hour. So there hasn't been a drastic reduction in deaths in the speed. However, in addition to the increased volume, you also have to note that the Maharashtra government has installed 135 cameras under the ITMS program there. All of these cameras are AI-based cameras that are equipped to detect, I think, 16 or 17 different kinds of violations, in addition to observational enforcement around no parking and so on and so forth. So I feel that it's a combination of enforcement, looking at certain engineering-related patterns, and a lot more visible enforcement. So not just cameras, but the interceptor vehicles, the enforcement vehicles, the patrolling vehicles. I think all of those things help reduce speeds. If you ask me, speed is still a big problem there, especially at night. We are yet to see the results of ITMS at night time when it comes to speeding related issues. During daytime, we have seen improvements also because of visible RTO and police enforcement. But speed still remains a big causal factor there. They are building the missing link tunnel and so on and so forth to get to split the traffic, to reduce the traffic volume, especially of commercial vehicles there. But it is still the launch is, I think, going to happen in October this year. So we'll see the effects of that. And because we work so closely with MSRDC and Highway Safety Patrol and the government of Maharashtra, we'll keep watching the trends in fatalities overall.
Goa is considered as a tourist destination, and everywhere in Goa, liquor is sold late night also. But during the course being conducted implemented during election time, all bars are closed at 10 p.m. Why it is not followed in other cities?
I think the government of Goa has to answer that question.
It's a major issue. Because of major accident, drunk and driving, and no enforcement.
Yeah, please, sir. You probably will have a lot more data on this than I would. Yeah. Sure. I have a quick question, sir. How many deaths were attributed to drinking and driving in South Goa?
So by issuing challan, the problem is not going to stop. So there will have to be restriction on sale of liquor. And after drinking, no one should drive the vehicle or whatever.
See, I'll give you a small analogy. There are various reasons why road crashes are such a big issue in our country. And while I spoke about what caused the crash, what caused the injury, and analysis and all of that, one of the things that I mentioned was the human factor. That people drive in a certain way, drinking and driving, over speeding, zigzag driving, and all of that. Why is it that people drive the way they drive in India? And the simple answer to that question is that the filtration system that determines who comes on the road or not, who gets the license to drive that weapon or not, is entirely fractured. Right? So when your filtration system is fractured, then what do you do after that? Because you have majority of people on the roads who have not been through either a formal training program or, licensing की तो बात ही नहीं करते हैं because there are capacity constraints there, right? You have one or two motor vehicle inspectors who have to process 50 to 100 requests a day. It's physically not possible to test everyone properly. So it requires a different system, something that we followed in the passport scheme, right? We moved from RPO to Passport Seva Kendra. It is time for us to move from RTO to License Seva Kendra, where you have the front end that is managed by a professional firm, and then eventually the license can be issued by the RTO. But the capacity that is required to test everyone properly, to ensure that they have the right medical fitness, to ensure that they have the right credentials, all of that requires an entire front end system that RTOs currently, most RTOs in the country don't have. So I won't blame them also because they are part of that system. It's a policy level decision that has to be taken to do away with the RTOs, have license Seva Kendra, and bring a public-private partnership setup that can address this issue of the filtration system. Now, once the filtration system is fractured, the next thing that can help is enforcement, right? Sir mentioned about the fact that there has been a decline in the number of challans issued, right? That could be because the enforcement in the previous year was successful, so people are more careful on the roads now. One will have to study the patterns to see what is exactly going on, but successful enforcement does that. On the Mumbai-Pune Expressway, I have seen when enforcement is on, not a single truck in that entire 100-kilometer stretch will drive in the middle or the right lane. They will all drive in the left lane. That's the impact of enforcement. Another impact of enforcement, I'll tell you. A person who has not gone through proper filtration or proper training in India, when they drive in Dubai or US or Europe, they'll become the best drivers in the world. Why? Enforcement. The certainty of getting caught and the severity of punishment, both of them come together to ensure that these drivers who are currently driving on our roads as though it's an open field will behave themselves when they are in those, on those roads. But there's also a third thing. The third thing is that a road should be able to communicate with you. A road should be able to tell you much in advance when to take the turn, when to slow down, when to stop, and all of those things, right? That communication between the road and the drivers is the other area of fracture in our country, right? I was just coming on, through parts of the highway where even lanes are missing. It's an open field there, right? Then signages are missing. Signages are where you have to take the turn, signage is right there. So there is no advance warning. There's no advance. We expect people to be perfect, right? So it's a road engineering is a big part of the problem, which is also one of the most under-addressed part of the problem. Now states have started booking engineers also. I mean, some southern states have started invoking sections in the law to book engineers and contractors for shoddy construction and shoddy maintenance of roads. But that is the other big part of the problem. And I can keep talking about it, but just to close that point, the signages on our road come through the Vienna Convention. The Vienna Convention assumed that everybody who's reading those signages will have gone through a training program, will speak English and read English, and will be able to follow those signages. Right? We need signages for India. We need signages that take into account our realities of our country. You put a no parking sign on the road, a truck driver will park right there in front of the no parking sign. Because he's seeing that there is, in addition to no parking, it has a truck ka sign in some form. We replaced some of those signages by saying rukega to thukega. And we put a sign of a rear end collision. Something going and ramming into the truck. Right? That and rukega to thukega. We message tested it. Because rukega to thukega was not something that we developed. We wanted to use the language that people use, that they will understand, and we saw a very incredible response rate to that messaging. So, signages alone, and I can go into road design and maintenance and curve sections and concrete structures on the road, gaps in median. It's a nightmare to be on some of our highways in this country. Even if you're a well-trained driver, the roads are designed in a way sometimes that you'll get into a crash. So it's a combination of a number of issues. On your specific point around drinking and driving, in my view, it has to be a strict and a very, very strict policy level that then has to be enforced strictly. So whatever the timing is, has to be enforced. Whatever the standards are, has to be enforced. DUI checkpoints have to be there every night and not only in drives. There has to be a proper system of doing it. So it becomes a culture. I remember in Delhi, there was a joint commissioner of traffic, Satyendra Garg was his name. He eventually went on to become DGP of Andaman and Nicobar. Satyendra Garg ensured that people left their cars behind if they ever had a plan to go and drink. There was a sea change because he started arresting people. They started, impounding vehicles. They really went after, and not on one night or 2 nights, every single night. So it became a big deal, and he had a huge success rate. So in his term, number of deaths in Delhi came down from 2,325 deaths, 2,325 deaths every year in Delhi in 2010 to under 1,600. He started this thing called Chase and Chalan. So you had 100 Pulsar motorcycles that were catching moving violations. Moving violations means violations that are happening while, inside the vehicle, talking on the mobile phone, not wearing a seat belt, zigzag driving. All of those things, they started, catching people. And they didn't care, who the violators were. So enforcement does have a role to play, but enforcement alone, again, can't fix it. Police enforcement, road engineering, better filtration system, and trauma care is, in a concerted fashion, is what will bring this down. Which is why the country is now setting up lead agencies with all of these representations. DRSC is there. I think Goa also has somebody was telling me, has panchayat level road safety committees also, which is all great. You have to have grassroots level involvement there. Yeah. The culture can be built over a period of time. So. So.
On 1st April 2002, my mother expired, and we had gone to, on 7th of April, we had gone to Nasabawadi for immersion of marriage. So I had at that time one tempo traveler vehicle. He said, that side, there is arrangement, we had to put like plywood, so 8% put sleep. So everything, whatever, coming from Margao, at around 6 o'clock on Olem Tarvandana Road, one truck had dashed against one Maruti van only. And he, two ladies and one yes, it was just within 5 minutes we reached there. I told my driver to bring my vehicle, put all three people inside. We were coming to Margao. We went to KMC in Pandi. They were elected to take. So I knew medical superintendent of KMC. I contacted him. He came over there. And all the three lives were saved.
Amazing, sir.
And he was at that time, I want to say in public, I gave my car to the police officer over there in KMC. If anything is there, I am ready to, I know nobody troubled me.
Very good. Excellent.
And this I want to say in public. At least what I feel, my mother lost, but at least in that
Very
time,
good.
three people were life are saved.
Excellent.
And after 10 days, I went to the residence in Ponda of the victims. Two sisters and one their neighbor. Father and mother did very quick.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Ma'am, I have a question. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah. So, sir, speed limit is decided by various factors. One factor is that there's something called the. I'll tell you which agency. So, typically, it's the road owning agency that determines what is the operational speed of a particular road. There's a design speed and then there's an operational speed. The road can be built for it can withstand, let's say, speeds of 120 kilometers an hour, but they might decide to keep it 60 kilometers an hour because of on various factors. For example, the one big factor is that if that road is also shared by non-motorized transport like pedestrians, cyclists, two-wheeler rider, or vulnerable road users like two-wheeler riders, children, then automatically, even if that road has a 120 kilometer design speed, it will be kept low so that in the event of any interaction between the motorized vehicle and non-motorized transport, injury can be prevented. In some cases, the police might also recommend to the road owning agency to issue certain speed limitations. So on national highways, the road owning agency is NHAI. NHAI has issued a speed upper limit of 120 kmph. But the state government, along with the police and the local authorities, can decide as to what speed they want to enforce on that particular road, and then inform NHAI, and then NHAI will put up its signages accordingly. So it's usually a combination of multiple factors that come together to determine what the speed number is, and then the concerned agency will put it up. It's mostly the road owning agency. No, it is a common factor in many states in the country, and the reason is that a government hospital is able to provide free care or low cost care because eventually they're being subsidized by the government. So you need to have a system of financing that will allow reimbursement of costs to even private hospitals. Just yesterday at the Transport Ministers meeting in Delhi, the Minister of Transport, Nitin Gadkari ji, has announced that the cashless treatment of road accident victim scheme, which was being piloted in Assam and Punjab, is now being rolled out nationwide, which will ensure that even private hospitals in the network, in the road network, are brought on board to serve the patients and not refuse them, because the government of India will pay them up to 1.5 lakh rupees for the care to be provided to those victims. So it's really a financing issue as to who's plugging that, because we might think that, okay, it's a moral obligation for them to save that life, which I agree with you, and at the very least they should provide first aid and then move the victim to a government hospital, which in many cases they don't do. But at scale, it becomes challenging to sustain that. So you need some level of financial support, which hopefully with this cashless treatment scheme, at least some part of it will get addressed.